Changeworking, moving minds for change that lasts.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Changeworking, a show for practitioners and coaches who help their clients create change. My name is Ruckus, and as always, I'll be in conversation with James Tripp. Today, we're talking about clean language. If you know James, if you follow James for a while, he would tell you that his top 3 influences would be Ericksonian hypnosis, NLP, and clean language. So I thought it would be great for us to do a podcast episode about clean language. If you've never heard of it before, I'm sure you're going to find it very interesting. And to go along with this episode, James and I would like to give you a free clean language quick start guide. You can download it absolutely for free at cleanlanguagecourse.com. Okay, so here's my conversation with James about clean language. Well, I was thinking about the title. We've talked about this before, the title, clean language. So language is the thing. If you've never heard of it before, clean, you don't really understand immediately. And then you latch on to language. And I know, especially in the hypnosis world, people buy these decks of cards with, hypnosis language patterns and things like that. And that's probably what a lot of people immediately go to. So yeah. What's sort of a basic, if you've never heard of it before, difference between standard hypnotic language patterns and what clean language is?
Right. So if we focus on the language side, and I just want to acknowledge something in what you've just said, I think because of the popularity in the NLP world of hypnotic language and these language models, and if we look at NLP, it's worth remembering that John Grinder was a professor of linguistics. So he had a particular interest in language and linguistics. So when they were doing modeling, the original kind of NLP models, the first 2 models were language models, the meta model and the Milton model. So there's this real focus on language, and the Milton model is all about hypnotic language, particularly those hypnotic language patterns of Milton H. Erickson. So the history of clean language is this was developed by a guy called David Grove in the 1980s, and it was developed specifically for facilitating people through a process for kind of running the charge of traumatic memories, but without having to go into the content of the memory. So that was the thing that David Grove wanted to avoid doing. He said, if you're going to reprocess the traumas of the past, there are 2 routes to do it. The blood and guts route, which is the standard route, you get into the content, and that can be re-traumatizing if not handled well, or you can do it differently. You can do it through embodied metaphors. So we'll talk about that perhaps in a moment. So I think for that reason, when James Lawley and Penny Tompkin, who were the primary modelers of David Grove's communication style and his approach, they were looking at the language that he used. They're looking at a richer set of communications than just language. So if you go on a clean language training, which would include our own clean language training, you will find elements that go beyond language. It's about communication because it's really not about the language. It's about the facilitation. It is what you are facilitating. So with that said, what we're looking to do when we're working with clean language is we're looking to get people to connect into elements of experience in ways that they haven't yet, and things that have been outside of consciousness. So if we think that we have 99% of our processing is outside of consciousness, how does that break through into consciousness? It's a mistake to think that the processing outside of consciousness can always be brought to consciousness without some kind of translation into a form that consciousness can grasp. So what's going on with clean language processing is it's about connecting people into the deeper material of what's going on for themselves that would normally be outside of consciousness, bringing it into conscious awareness, but also bringing it into experience in ways that allow it to be worked with and transformed and changed. And the processing itself, when somebody engages with this, it tends to be very vivid for them. And this is where I think the relationship between this and hypnosis comes in, is people think, well, what's hypnosis? They say, well, it's suggesting things. But what are you suggesting? You're suggesting a transformation in someone's experience and the behaviors that unfold from that. Clean approaches, whether you think of them as about language or not, the language is actually very simple. It's about doing the same thing, but it's about evoking this stuff, drawing it out bringing it to life and working with somebody collaboratively in engaging with that and transforming that in useful ways. Much more about working with experience, drawing out, working with experience. So I'll just say this as well. Mm-hmm. The reason it's clean is because it's the opposite of what you might be doing with something like the Milton model. Now, a major part, the backbone of classic hypnotic language that comes from Milton Erickson's work, the major idea is presupposition. It's the ideas that you're seeding. So what clean language is aiming to do is absolutely minimize the ideas being seeded. Just to draw things out, the organizational structures, the ideas out from the client. And then from a process directive, not from a kind of seeding ideas perspective, shift things in different directions. So that's why it's called clean, because we're not putting any of our stuff into the system apart from our facilitation decisions.
And I've heard you say that clean language isn't about language. It's about experience. Is that what the word you used?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. In a sense, it's about experience, but it's about what lies underneath of experience, but bringing that into the realm of experience. If we can't experience something, we can't interact with it in any kind of conscious or intentional way. Now, there are approaches to hypnosis and hypnotic change work where you leave things entirely outside of consciousness and you rely on the deeper intelligence of the client to do the work. And that is absolutely fine. Those methods can work extremely well and are the methods of choice for some people, I think, in certain circumstances. But most people want to, there's this desire for consciousness to participate, and it can participate fruitfully. And I think clean language operates with this idea. We're bringing things into consciousness, bringing them to life, therefore they come alive in experience, and then we're working with them, and the conscious mind is participating in this. It's not being overbearing, it's not trying to control it, but it is present and it is participating.
I've noticed in watching demos of you using clean language, there's always a moment where the client or the demo subject goes, oh, like there's an aha moment, there's a reveal, and it's clear something's come into their awareness that they had no idea was there before. And I get this idea of how it can bring something out that the client didn't even know was there and reveals it to them. I'm just curious about that, how clean language facilitates that happening.
Right. Well, we are meaning makers. We are sense makers. So we sort of think about things. We make connections. But we don't make connections between things that don't come into our mind. So something's got to kind of come into our mind and come into our consciousness in order to make a connection. So a lot of what we're doing with clean language is bringing stuff out of the unconscious. Now, it doesn't come in the form that we would immediately go, oh, I know what that means. You know, I remember years ago, I was having somebody facilitate me through a clean language process, and this kind of plastic kid's water pistol appeared somewhere in the metaphor landscape that was unfolding. Now, just for people that are not kind of initiated into this, and this is one of these things, it's a bit like there's that old cliched line that says you can't explain to somebody who's never taken LSD what it's like to take LSD. Right? I'm not saying it's the same category of thing, but when people go into cleanly facilitated experiences, they are very vivid. They go into things really do kind of come alive to a greater or lesser extent. For some people, it's crazy. Like it's almost like entering a completely different world. They become deeply absorbed in it. Hence, it's very hypnotic. So when I say this sort of plastic water pistol, it was kind of some up here in my mind space. There are other things going on. Now, when this plastic water pistol turned up, and I was quite early in my clean language journey, the facilitator was saying to me, and is there anything else about the plastic? And I'm thinking to myself at the time, it doesn't really matter what the plastic is. That, you know, my conscious mind was going, well, why are they fixating on the plastic? Like it's orange and it's transparent, and what kind of transparent? It's like, well, you can just see through it. Oh, I can see a little bit of the gun on the other side. And at that point, pop, the relevance of the transparency and the plastic just hit me. I was like, oh, and it gave me a real conscious insight into the shift or the change that we're making. Now, I do want to make it clear that whilst through a clean language process, you do get these conscious insights. I know what that means now, or that makes sense now. You do get these, and they can be part of the change process. But it is not the aim of clean language to get conscious insight. It is not the aim of it. It is a sort of peripheral part, or just a part of the milieu of the whole thing, not the raison d'etre.
I've noticed several times when I'm a client in a situation like that and a metaphor comes up, I can almost never guess what the metaphor means. And it's a discovery as we go deeper. And so now it's to the point when a metaphor comes up, there's a part of me that gets excited. Oh, wait, I can't wait to find out what that is. And I've stopped trying to guess ahead of time because I'm never right when I just, when I try to go for the guess. I just find that really interesting.
And that's a really healthy thing as well. I mean, we've talked about this before, how the sort of approach that I take to change work is an emergent change work approach. Clean language is a very emergent process, always has been. And clean language and David Grove's work and thinking is always a deep influence on me. Something I got into early in my change work career. And David Grove was very interested in emergence. So things like clean language, that process, there's no target ahead of time. The change emerges and surprises us. There's no choosing consciously a solution ahead of time and then trying to hypnotically or otherwise chase that solution. It's like there's always a starting out from a place of we do not know or claim to know what the right solution to this issue will be. Right? That's a really important thing. That's something that's very much in common with Erickson's work as well. But even though Erickson's work influenced NLP greatly, it seems to have got lost in NLP, in that a lot of NLP people seem to talk about engineering particular outcomes and, programming people. Erickson's work was not directed like that. It was very emergent. David Grove's work is very emergent. David Grove had processes like clean language, and then he developed clean space, which is a very emergent process, which the head, heart, and gut approach that I teach is based off clean space. So thank you, David Grove, again. He was also developing something, and I think we mentioned this briefly the other day, called the power of six, which I don't really know anything about. But it was just this principle of when you kind of repeat something in a very connected way 6 times, it tends to change and evolve. Changes emerge out of it. And I kind of do this, part of the change work process, I do this, an idea that I got from Lisa Schwartz, which I call the new truth. Whereas I'll say to a client, what's your new truth now? At the end of a session, and they'll just come up with something, and I get them to repeat that 6 times whilst they remain connected with it, which is a kind of power of 6 thing. But again, somebody will say, why are you doing that? Because interesting things will emerge. When we bring the right kind of processing to something, when we bring generative processing to something, it generates fruits, good things. And that's always what we're doing with change work. So for me, this kind of clean approach of we don't know where we're going, but we're going somewhere good. And we allow ourselves to be open to what's going to surprise us throughout the process, instead of making judgments about what's useful, what's not during the process. I will say this is something I think is relevant to change work in general. And this is a client factors element. Some clients will evaluate everything you do, everything you suggest, to see whether it makes sense to them or they think it's going to work or not before they do it. That is a massive barrier to change. People deciding what's important and what's not before exploring it. That is a huge barrier to change in all change work. So a massive client factor that's really going to help with change work in general is when people are open to being curious about what might happen next and about what this might mean. That openness, that curiosity, that creation of an internal space to allow new and interesting things to come through. That is a crucial kind of client factor headspace thing for all change work, not just clean language. And this is worth being aware of. This is slightly aside from clean, but once you know this, you can start looking for the pattern in a client. Is this client pre-assessing every move, every maneuver, or are they just open and engaging and responding? There's a distinction that I used when I used to teach hypnosis without trance, which is experiencer versus reality tester.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are reality testers, and what that means is every idea, every suggestion, everything is like, well, is this right? Is this correct? Is this incorrect? Is that going to work? Is that not going to work? They do this reality testing.
Right.
Other people just go, let's see what happens.
Right.
They're open to the experience. So in all hypnotic work, and I would suggest probably all change work and coaching and therapy and everything, but certainly hypnotic work, you want people to be experiencers. You want them to be open to curiosity on what might happen next.
I feel like that's probably, well, I would say definitely every bit as important for the practitioner to be open as well. And I say that because a lot of early on, you start training in some of these modalities and you're kind of taught what the outcome is supposed to be. And so you go into the session expecting that to happen. Does it make sense?
Right. Yeah.
And how can you engender that as a practitioner, that idea of staying open and never knowing where to go?
This is something where clean language is really, really strong.
Right.
Because it is so structureless under the surface. You learn these principles of how to evoke things and how to work with things, but you don't have any preconceptions about what should come through, what should or shouldn't come through, and where it should end up. So it trains you to be very open. One of the things that David Grove used to say, and this has deepened for me over the years, it's one of those things that just keeps coming back and gets deepened further and further. He used to say, it's okay not to know. And it's okay not to know. This is one of his little tenets or mottos. This is huge because so much of the time practitioners want to know. They've got to know what's the right thing. I need to know the right method, the right technique. David Grove would say it's okay not to know because the client and their responses and what comes through the client is going to give you everything you need. And you don't need to understand it. In clean language, there's no interpretation of anything. You're just working with the experiential qualities. So it's okay not to know. It's a good, strong thing. If you look at Erickson's big on, I don't know.
Right.
Erickson would go beyond it's okay not to know, and he would be, it's good not to know. You see, Erickson's not knowing, not doing is about keeping that overly analytical mind that assesses things and decides whether they're going to work or not offline. So when we can be okay with not knowing, we don't have to assess relentlessly. We can just allow.
So I've never heard you mention the part about, I want to dig into this a little bit, the part about what's your new truth, and then you have them say it 6 times. Go into that a little bit more because I've never heard you talk about that. And is the idea that it change every time they repeat it, it changes?
It can change.
Okay.
And it often does change. Now, how you frame this for somebody is going to increase or decrease the likelihood of change, which is true of everything. You know, framing is a huge thing in and of itself. You know, let's say I said to somebody, you know, what's your new truth now? And when I set this up, one of the things I'll say is, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to come up with the first answer that comes to you. Are you ready? They say, yes. I say, what's your new truth now? Maybe they say, the first thing that comes out their mouth is, I just don't need this anymore. Right? That's what comes out. Now, this will be asked at the end of a session after a load of work is done. So it's a sort of a kind of summary piece or an anchor phrase that wraps in all of the change that's been done in the session. So let's say they said something like that, I just don't need this anymore. Now, I'm going to, at that point, turn around to them and say, okay, I want to invite you to repeat that 6 times. But as you do so, really stay connected with it, really tune into the feel of it, and make sure that's just exactly as it needs to be. So they'll go maybe like this. I just don't need this anymore. I just don't need this. Actually, can I change it? Like, this is often what happens. And I say yes.
Yeah.
And go, I just don't want this anymore.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Or then maybe they go, I'm beyond this now. So often people will check in and say, is it okay if I change this? Because what they're doing, now if we track this back, another big influence on me is Eugene Gendlin's work and felt sense. It's that felt sense connection. When I set the frame, I'm really saying, without technical jargon, remain in contact with the felt sense as you say it, right? And let that inform any changes or upgrades that might be needed. This is a standard thing in Jenden's work, is you get people to check and make sure that what they're saying fits with the felt sense. So the felt sense will often suggest a change or an upgrade or a modification. But David Grove, I don't know if he was exposed to Jenden's work at all, or if he just came to that conclusion himself. And I'm not entirely sure how Grove did that work, because I was not trained in Power of Six. I don't know that many people have been exposed to that. That was what he was working on, or one of the crazy things he was working on when he died. He died quite young. He would have had a whole bunch of innovations because he's a very creative, inventive individual to come. So that's unfortunate that his time was so short. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's how he did it. But like, so I do this thing. It's got influences from Eugene Gendlin, from David Grove, and from Lisa Schwartz, which is this new truth piece. And it's a cool bit of business.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And just, I guess, to be clear, you're not asking your new truth unless you're pretty sure they have a new truth already. Correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is standard fare. One of the major things about the way I approach change work and what we teach in client shifts is to be constantly in a generative feedback loop. So you want to be connected with the client moment by moment, right? And you're tracking for difference all the time. Difference. As you track for difference, when you see difference, this sort of comes from clean language again. These sensibilities greatly come from my training in clean language. This was kind of early on for me. I did NLP, and quite shortly afterwards, after my formal NLP training, I got into clean language. So this is that it really enhanced my ability to be super present and work alive in the moment with ongoing feedback. So you're looking for difference. Always. It's the difference that makes the difference. Even that difference that makes the difference piece that I run through, I call it the difference engine, or I call it differencing, call it different things at different times. Comes from David Grove. Again, it's a closing piece at the end of Clean Space. What is it you know now that's different than before? But you can take that differencing, like every time you're doing a clean facilitation, you are paying attention to the unfolding landscape of experience and ideas and metaphors. You are paying attention to how that's organized, so you see when shifts happen. Sometimes the shifts happen in the metaphor landscape. Sometimes they happen in the client's physiology. But when difference is there, you take that difference and then I call it blowing on the ember. But clean language is like, this is what it does so beautifully. It evokes conditions where change happens, and when that change happens, it takes that change and nurtures it, evolves it, encourages its blossoming. It's very, very organic. It's not so much client-led as led by the deeper intelligences of the client. And I would go beyond that and say the deeper intelligences of the broader system that the client is a part of, but that's getting a bit out there.
So would you say the difference between leading a client and leading a client's attention? Is there a difference there?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. So with clean language, you are directing attention in. It is not clean at all in terms of the process side of where you are directing attention. You are making judgment calls continually about where to shine that spotlight of awareness and consciousness. That's always in the mix.
Right. Well, even back to what you were saying earlier about the plastic gun. And they could have said, and is there anything else about a gun versus is there anything else about the plastic? Like you could decide which part you want to spotlight in the sentence.
Absolutely. And that's what your major role as the facilitator is choosing where to direct attention, what elements to direct attention on, and influencing the quality of the attention. So you're not being clean remotely in terms of process and attention directing. But what you're not doing is suggesting particular concepts or ideas. I mean, there still are. You can't utter any words without there being some presuppositions in there. Like a basic directionalizing question in clean language is, what would you like to have happen? Now, of course, that seeds ideas. It has a presupposition. You would like something to happen.
Right.
And it has implications that are not quite presuppositions. It doesn't imply that your agency need be a factor in this, because you say, what would you like to have happen, not what do you want? So it's a subtle suggestion of a disconnection of agency. Now, some people might find that odd, particularly coming from me, because I'm a big fan of helping people to develop their agency. But it's a temporary unhooking so that people don't get dragged down by their perceived lack of power or limitations. Right? If I say to someone, what would you love to create? There's all sorts of questions about your ability to create it that come into the mix. If I say, what would you like to have happen? Then their ability to achieve that or not is not a part of what's implied in the question.
Yeah. I mean, what would you like to have happen? I'd like to be able to fly. I mean, it doesn't, I can like that to happen, but I know it's not going to happen.
Right. You can know it's not going to happen. If you take a kind of solution-focused approach, which actually James Lawley and Penny Tompkins' clean language take, what their underlying process, symbolic modeling, I would say is very solution-focused. David Grove's is more about processing trauma. Penny and James's is more solution-focused. But if you take a solution-focused approach, you say, what would you like to have happen? And somebody says, I would like to be able to fly. Right? And then you can ask, and if you were able to fly, then what would happen? Right? So you can stay reasonably clean, or you could go a little bit off the classic clean toolkit and say, so you would like to be able to fly, and if you could fly, what would that be like for you? Oh, it would be so freeing. You see, they can't fly, but they can have freeing. And freeing. And what kind of freeing is this freeing that goes with flying? Just a sense of relief and release, and like I can go anywhere. Now we're getting into stuff that can be a resource, can come alive within the system, can be significant. So this is the thing, is not to be concerned about, ridiculous outcomes. And this is a sensibility that comes from a solution-focused approach. Like some people go, but what if the solution people want is not possible?
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. They actually want something that is possible through that impossible solution. So you keep tracking to what is possible and you bring that to life.
I was thinking back about earlier we talked about your directed intention, and you have the choice as the facilitator or the practitioner to choose which word to spotlight, for one example, where to ask the client to focus their attention. Is that just a matter of instinct, of like, or are you just sometimes just trying things to see the results you get, or do you have an idea of like, hey, I think that there's something here in this word versus the other word?
I think all of those things is the answer in many ways. There's no algorithm. There's no sort of tables of categories that you sort by or anything like that.
Right.
I think I mentioned in the audio that we put on the information page for the Clean Language course, I mentioned that I'd done about 30 days training in clean language. And I've said that to people in the past. They say, but like, the original Clean Compass that Penny and James came out with had 9 basic questions.
Right.
And then what's called the Clean Syntax. It's a whole bunch of specialized questions. There's now some variations on those, so it comes in about 12, 13 questions, but there are actually variations on the basic 9. So like you've got 9 questions in this syntax. What are you doing for 30 days?
Right.
So you're doing a lot of facilitation for 30 days, and you're getting coached a lot on the choices you're making. So there are different ways of thinking about it, different frames, and there's no right thing. So those 30 days training are a bunch of different abstract drills to get you to pay attention to different things in different ways so that you end up seeing a richer sense of possibilities or a richer range of possibilities when you're thinking about asking one of those 9 questions. Of what do I ask it? Where do I ask it? What direction do I want to tilt things in? And in a way, there's that 30 days training because they acknowledge that it comes from experience. So the 30 days training, it gives you experience doing a lot of facilitation and getting a lot of debriefs and a lot of coaching. Now, in a sense, that training is training your unconscious mind. This gets talked a lot about in NLP, in hypnosis, the training of the unconscious mind. But most people don't want their unconscious mind trained. They want their conscious mind trained. I understand that. But those explicit frameworks that the quote-unquote conscious mind works with will not give you the answer to these things. So sometimes it's just seeing more, right? Seeing more of what's there. It's learning to see. And I'm using see metaphorically because obviously you're hearing, you're sensing. It's a full range of sensing and seeing a richer picture. I'm learning to draw at the moment, and I'm doing a lot of figure drawing. And, you know, I'm approaching day 50 of doing it because I'm drawing every day. And there are things I can see in people now, how they're structured, the different relationships between different parts of them. I've been looking at people my whole life, but I never saw that before.
Right.
Now I see it. So if I want to draw, you know, a shape or get a line or a curve, and I know the different landmarks are going to relate, and I can see how the 2D represents the 3D. And I don't doubt that I'm still seeing only a fraction of what there is to see as I develop my eye and my instinct. And it's fascinating for me to do this. I think there's a similar process in learning Changework, whether it's clean language or not. So you got to do it. You got to pick the patterns. You got to be aware of it. There are abstract drills you can do that start to help you develop that. But in the end, it's about being there and noticing and paying attention.
Hey, this is Ruckus jumping in here real quick. I hope you're enjoying this conversation about clean language. I hope you're intrigued. And if you're interested, please go get your free Clean Language Quick Start Guide. Just pop your email in the form and you'll get it right away. And you can find that at cleanlanguagecourse.com. Okay, back to the show. So here's what I find interesting about clean language is that you could facilitate a session that is nothing but clean language, or you can make use of the clean language patterns in and around a framework or modality of something else that you already use, like NLP or even coaching, standard therapy. And
yes.
I find that super interesting.
Yeah, I think what it's good for, and it's this thing about working with what is coming through people's experience. So any modality that is interactive, you can enhance and augment with clean language significantly. I know you're a big fan of IFS, internal family systems. That's a very interactive process. You know, so there's a lot of space for clean language to come into something like that and augment that. A lot of NLP processes are interactive processes. I wanted to, at the UK Hypnosis Conference, demonstrate, I was going to do Connie Ray Andreas's core transformation process, or a stripped down version of it, using largely clean language to facilitate it. Because I thought it would be a good demo of how you could use clean language in conjunction with something else. I never got to do the demo because I asked the client, I said, is there something that you would like to change, something going on in your life you'd like to change or have a different surround? And she said, I don't know. I feel that there is, but I'm not sure what. So like for core transformation, you need something explicit. She said, I feel that there is, but I don't know what. But with clean language, I could still work. And I simply said, and you feel that there is, but you don't know what, and you feel that there is. And when you feel, where do you feel? And that's clean language. So she came up with something, a description of her experience, description of what's going on. We focus in. And she said, I don't know, but there's something over here. Right? That's where we went. And I think it was something like, and something over here. And when you look over here and there's something over here, what kind of something? And then we're in. We're into the matrix. So I was able to do a session there, and that had a very interesting outcome. That was a good demo, but it wasn't what I wanted to demo. I wanted to demo that you could augment, like you could pick any NLP process, but you could pick IFS. If you do solution-focused therapy, you could do something like that. You could enhance anything. even stuff like metacognitive therapy, which doesn't seem like it should be about that kind of thing. As soon as you get a shift in experience, you can amp up that shift in experience. And that's useful in and of itself.
I feel like it would be especially useful for people that are considered themselves coaches, just straight coaches that don't necessarily have an interest in learning hypnosis or NLP or whatever their assumptions about what those are. But weaving that into coaching language, I feel like would be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, I think, the thing about clean language, now sometimes people go, oh, clean language is a bit weird, isn't it? And if you do it strictly, it's a bit weird. But it's worth remembering that David Grove was trained in hypnosis, and I think he was pretty explicit about that. And I have been told, I think, if memory serves, now time has gone by and it's many years since I was kind of in this world more primarily, but I seem to remember Judy Reese saying something about back in the 80s, David Grove would not even teach clean language to anybody who was not trained in hypnosis, who didn't already have a sense of hypnotic work and probably largely more sort of Ericksonian sides of hypnosis and that kind of thing. So it's a recognition that clean language as a process, when it's done the way David Grove did it, it was very hypnotic. Now, I've said this before, hypnosis is weird. It's supposed to be weird by definition. It's not supposed to be an everyday common thing. People go for hypnosis not because they want a pragmatic solution. They go because they want something that's completely out of the box. So that kind of weird quality to it is part of that sort of immersive thing. So it fits in so well in a hypnotic context. Now, Penny and James are not so much hypnotists, but they're more NLP'ers, but they're really quite psychoactive in their facilitation. And I think my friend Judy is more at the coaching end of the spectrum with things. So I think people can sort of think it sounds weird when it starts to become conversational, but still keeps those original forms. So it's sort of losing the hypnotic tonality and those hypnotic resonances. And it becomes a more everyday conversational thing, but it's still got that unusual form to it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's necessarily a problem when people understand that they are in a process. It's not an issue. They go, oh yeah, this is the process. This is the nature of the process.
Right.
If you want to weave it in more organically into kind of regular, more conversational coaching, what you need to do is you can take some of the questions, but you will change how you use the syntax, so you're not using the full syntax all the time necessarily. And you can add extra bits in that are not technically part of it just to make it feel a little more conversational, so it all starts to go under the radar. But what is important is that you understand what you are intending to do, which you learn through doing the more explicit clean language sort of training. Then you can bury it. You can lose the traditional forms, but still keep the intentions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say that folks that are hiring someone as a coach, even just that, they're already still acknowledging that they're there for a process of some sort. They're not there for hypnosis, but that's different than, I always say, standing in a line at the bank and you're just talking to a stranger. The difference there is you could still weave in some clean language in a certain way and help. I like that idea of the developing questions and how if someone presents something that's bothering them or a challenge, it only takes a couple of questions for them to get deep and rich with what that is, and it reveals something to them that they weren't even aware of. Even just doing that is a gift to someone, I think.
Right, I think it is. And you can do it in everyday conversations, helping out friends and family. One of the things I would say to be a little bit careful of, the why I still think you sort of got to keep it buried, is because friends and family and people usually don't want to be processed.
Right.
They want to be related to as your friend or family member or whatever, you know, and they might want some sympathy or some input or some advice. But often people can be like, now there's a process going on, and it can seem a little less human. I saw on Instagram this morning, Amy Bell, who's an NLP trainer in Melbourne, and I really like a lot of what Amy is doing. She's got some T-shirts printed out for her practitioner graduates, and it said on them, human first. I love that. I think that's really great. Such a refreshing thing. I think that's such a strong message for people being trained in NLP or anything, clean language, whatever. Human first. Be a human first. And sometimes with things like clean language, when people get into them, this is a classic with the NLP meta model. You teach people NLP meta model and they stop being a human. They become what is, sort of tongue-in-cheek referred to as a meta monster. Because they suddenly become this meta model algorithm and they just, so it's easy with something, a system like it's a very powerful algorithmic system in a way. The strength of something like clean language is that you can be algorithmic with it. You can be. And once you learn the algorithm, it's powerful and it's a transformative algorithm. But if somebody senses that you are running an algorithm on them, then you are not being human first.
Right.
Right? Now, that's the issue. So there's a little bit of artistry. And again, if you've got a context where somebody's formally come along for Changework, for example, and you go, okay, we're going to do it now, they expect some sort of formalized process, right? So you can almost be, yes, you still want to be human, but you can kind of be process first and human second. You have license to do that sometimes.
Right.
But with friends and family, when doing change work out there in the world, you don't have license to be process first. You have to be human first.
Right.
And that's where having that sensibility about how to adapt it and humanize it and make it more organic and warmer and all of these sorts of things comes in.
So just for fun, if you're a coach and you're just doing sort of life coaching, any kind of coaching, I guess, for a client, and you want to start incorporating this, but say it's a client you've had for a while, and you've never done clean language, what's a way to introduce that some of what might happen next might be a little odd or a little unusual, but what's a good frame for that?
Well, actually, dynamics inside of coaching, they kind of ebb and flow, and there's different levels of intensity that you might bring. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, when doing more interactive conversational coaching, which I do a lot of, there'll be moments where you're just kind of exploring something, touching the edges of something, tickling something. And there are moments where you might want to put some heat on something, right? You might want to turn up the heat a little bit.
Right.
And so there's a shift in the energy or a shift in the dynamic. In coaching, you want to be able to manage that regardless of what you're doing, whether you're doing clean language or whatever. And one little maneuver, you could call this a micro frame. So you're going to frame a change in energy or a change in dynamic.
Okay.
Somebody might say something and you think, yeah, that could do with some more energy or attention on it. Now, you could just dive in and ask a question about that, like a clean question, any coaching question. But if somebody isn't seeing the relevance of that bit, but you are, it can be a bit off or a bit weird. Because you're sort of forcing their attention onto something that seems to them like a throwaway line or a trivial piece or something like that.
Right.
So one simple way of kind of microframing in the flow is to say to somebody, oh, that's interesting. Do you mind if I coach you a little on that? Even though you go, well, why would you need to say that? We're in a coaching session. Of course, we have the tacit assumption we're going to be doing coaching, but it highlights we're going to shift gears into a slightly different mode. Right. So if you say, oh, that's interesting, do you mind if I coach you a little on that? And they go, no. Now they've just given permission for you to take the lead in this moment in a very specific way about a very specific thing. And then you can kind of open up with kind of clean language questions, or if you've got other things in your toolkit and you want to bring in other precision questioning methods or facilitation methods, you can sort of bring them in a little.
Gotcha.
Or a little more strongly.
Yeah. I heard you say that if you had to pick one thing that made the biggest difference in your client work, it was clean language.
Yeah.
So when you started learning it and incorporating it, what changed in your work, and what's one thing that surprised you that you weren't expecting?
The main thing that changed, and this is the thing that sometimes I forget myself. I forgot this myself until just before I did my presentation back last month at the UK Hypnosis Conference. The sensibilities underneath of clean language, that feedback loop, that pacing and leading feedback loop that is implicit within what's called the clean syntax. even if you lose the syntax, once you understand what it's doing and what it's for, and you understand its driving of the feedback loop, that for me was absolutely huge. And it is still the primary underpinning of all the change work and all hypnosis that I do, and much of my everyday communication that I'm doing.
Wow.
So that has changed my whole communication game across the board. Whether any clean questions are coming out of my mouth or not, that's running in the background. So that's a huge piece. It is the basis, and I'd forgotten this in a sense until the November talk. It's the basis. People who know my Hypnosis Without Trance stuff, they go, I love that. No clean language, no hypnosis without trance. Wouldn't have existed. People are going, wow, this is a really different way of eliciting hypnotic phenomena. It's not clean, but it's got that kind of feedback loop. You know, I'm seeding a lot more than you would with clean language, but then what starts to come alive, I'm taking and I'm running into the feedback loop like you would with clean language. So my Hypnosis Without Trance approach is entirely based on that. It changed everything about how I did NLP processes, because instead of, when I say NLP processes, I'm talking about these out-of-the-box stock things. I think the 6-step reframe and the collapsing anchors were the very first of them, and then they kind of evolved, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them now.
Right.
But they're all step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. They're all really linear in a lot of ways. So one of the things that happened for me is I knew many of these processes, and they came alive and became so much more flexible and adaptive and dynamic. So they were running in conjunction with the client, not trying to railroad the client along a particular set of tracks that have been pre-established to be good for them by somebody who never met them.
Right.
You know, that's imbued everything. And like I often say, a huge amount of the work that I do is conversational hypnosis. And that clean syntax, what I mean by the clean syntax, it's almost like a little engine. It's a pacing and leading engine that ensures you are constantly in co-creation with your client, that you're constantly working with what they bring, right? It's there the whole time. That is running under the surface, even when I'm in much more of an Ericksonian mode. It's very likely that a similar mechanism was there for Erickson. You know, there's a relationship here. People are into Ericksonian stuff, which I very much am. David Grove wouldn't have existed. His work wouldn't have existed without Milton H. Erickson. There was a huge influence there. There's a story about David Grove that he was interested in sales, and somebody told him about this thing called NLP. And he went along in the late 70s to some seminar that Richard Banner and John Grinder did. And there was supposed to be a section that was to do with sales and influence, and then a section that was to do with therapy and change work. And you could go and pick these different modules or something and go and do this thing. But nobody was interested in the sales stuff apart from him. So they didn't run that. So he was turned up for this event, and he ended up going into the therapy things, and he got interested in it. That's how he got into therapy, was from Banner and Grinder. So initially he had this NLP influence, and I think the Ericksonian stuff definitely would have come through the NLP that he initially did, but it may be he also connected with Ericksonian stuff beyond that. But David Grove was a phenomenally creative individual. He was a very independent thinker. So he would have been coming up with new solutions to address these old problems. But I do think that kind of interactivity, it is there in Erickson, but David Grove has sort of brought it out and made it more explicit. And I think that what's called the clean syntax, this engine, it's a pacing and leading engine that takes stuff and feeds stuff back and transforms it in the process. That, I think, is of value to anybody that wants to understand or get better at more Ericksonian or post-Ericksonian approaches to hypnotism and change work.
Well, I have to assume there are folks listening to this podcast that have no idea what the clean syntax is. Could you give us just the basic, so we kind of have an understanding?
Yeah. So in its most nuts and bolts raw form, the clean syntax is of the structure and fill in the blank, and when fill in the blank, question. That's the clean syntax. So how you feeling, Ruckus?
Healthy.
Healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And when healthy, like this, what kind of healthy?
Mentally clear.
Mentally clear. And healthy and mentally clear. And when healthy and mentally clear, is there anything else about healthy?
About healthy. There's an energy to it.
Right. And an energy to it. So that's how it works, right? I was doing it full there, but you don't always do the full syntax. You'll sometimes sort of strip it down. That caught you by surprise because you thought I was going to ask about mentally clear, didn't you?
Yeah, I was already deciding what my answer was, and you went to healthy, and I knew you could tell.
Right. So that's an example of the choice, right? Because I've now got healthy and mentally clear. Now, you can think at that point as a facilitator, oh, yeah, we've moved on from healthy to mentally clear. But it's like, let's just take a little more time here to enrich healthy. We haven't lost mentally clear. We can come back to that. We can develop that. But it's just like, so we've got I asked you what kind of healthy, you said mentally clear. And is there anything else about healthy is where I went next. But what I wanted to show there was actually the clean syntax. So it's and when, and then directing question or whatever.
Right.
Now, it might be that you change that to and as, right? Or it might be and when, right? So like you say mentally clear, I might say and mentally clear. And mentally clear. Right? See, if I feed back like that, I've just led, haven't I? In a process sense, because mentally clear is two words. I could ask about clear. I could ask about mentally clear. I could ask about mentally. Right? Or I can go and mentally clear. And mentally clear. And what kind of mentally is this when you're mentally clear? Right? So that's not strictly the syntax, but the point of the syntax is to create a framework in which you can improvise and be a bit more organic and a bit more hypnotic. But from a hypnosis perspective, that little engine, that clean syntax bit, learning to improvise around that gives you so much impact and so much ability to work hypnotically with anything that the client brings through.
Yeah, I can't. It's hard to even explain the difference of my understanding. Like I was feeling good, and then now, just because you asked those couple of questions, it's a different experience. It's not just an understanding. Like it literally feels different now than it did 2 minutes ago. Right.
That is the thing about clean language. It is the invitation into an experience. Yeah. So if I said, explain mentally clear to me.
Yeah.
Right? That would, or if I said, what do you mean by mentally clear? Right? And everything, my tonality, my choice of words pushes you in an intellectualizing direction.
Right.
So I don't want you to be in an intellectualizing direction. I want you to be in the full body experience of it. If there's mentally clear, I want you to be in the experience of mentally clear.
And it did. It literally pulled me. I started to experience it more. It's just, right. That's such a cool
So people
technique.
Who are into NLP and they talk about conversational state elicitation, the thing about clean language is it seriously ups your game with conversational state elicitation. Right? It really significantly does. It's so much more effective than the classic, remember a time when you felt mentally clear? See what you saw, hear what you heard, and feel those feelings now.
Right.
Right? That maybe it's okay as a beginner's idea, but that doesn't cut the mustard for really evoking experience.
Yeah.
So I don't tend to do that. Even if I go off topic, I might go mentally clear. Right? And I might say, if you are feeling mentally clear like this right now, you'd know it, wouldn't you? That's not strictly clean language, but I would never have developed that evocation pattern, which I use regularly, without clean language. So this really ups your conversational game. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I wanted to circle back. What surprised you when you started incorporating clean language into your work? What surprised you about it?
I remember a particular occasion. Before I trained formally in NLP, I was teaching myself NLP rigorously and obsessively for quite a few years. Mm-hmm. And this is while I was training as an osteopath. So I was using the stuff in a variety of different ways at that time, partly to enhance my communication with my clients as an osteopath, because we'd work in a teaching clinic. I found it a really challenging experience doing this osteopathy, and it was a high-pressure environment for the students. I took a year out. It was a 5-year training. I took a year out to make some money and pay for my 4th-year fees after 3 years. And I'd been so into NLP, and it made such a difference to me. I had the opportunity to train, so I took the training, and then I thought, I want to do this. And I never went back to osteopathy, but I did go back to the College of Osteopaths, because I knew the clinic manager, Lynn, and she said to me, oh, will you come back? Because when the students have their vivas, their live exams, they're cracking up. They're just like cracking under the pressure. And I came back and I started to, I think I went in like a day a week around exams. People are booking for sessions. I charged a discounted fee for them, like a student rate. And I'd been doing a lot of this clean language training running up to this point. And what I found that I did, first of all, is I didn't replace the more kind of Ericksonian hypnotic work that I was doing. And I still work a lot this way to this day. I would get into a sort of clean, interactive facilitation, bring out resources, bring out differences, and then kind of segue into a more Ericksonian trance flow, which is more unidirectional. They sort of settle down and go quiet and drift off while I run loops in a more unidirectional way. But all of those loops are built out of all the resource material that we'd unpacked through the clean language work. Now, because I'd already been working in a more unidirectional classical trance work way before starting to introduce this clean language stuff, what surprised me, I suppose, was the massive difference in apparent impact. And I mean this in terms of the feedback that I was getting, because I was seeing these people more than once, I was coming back in, but in terms of the engagement and the response to the trance work. Now, I was fairly new to trance work in general by the time. I hadn't been doing that much trance work for too long before I started learning clean language and integrating it. But one of the things that I did find, and I know this is a problem that a lot of people apparently have, is I would get a good number of people that would come to me for hypnotherapy and say, I don't think I was really under. I don't think I was hypnotized. I don't think I was.
Right.
As soon as I introduced this clean language methodology and started weaving the trances out of what had come from them, I never got that. Never. There was no more, I don't think I was. Right? So it kind of fixed that problem of trance work, and it fixed it in a really elegant way. Like before that, it's like, I don't think I was. Oh no, maybe I didn't do enough deepeners. You know, and what is a deepener? Some metaphor for deepening, or saying the word deeper, deeper, deeper enough times. You know, but the fact is they just became so profoundly absorbed in it because the material was so personally relevant and meaningful to them. It was from them and of them, and they were of it. So it couldn't, you know, there was no way that they wouldn't be taken deeply into it. So that just went away. It fixed that side of things. And, you know, to this day, I know hypnotherapists who say, you know, I get these clients sometimes that say, I don't think I was hypnotized, or I don't think I was properly under, whatever. If they learned clean language, they would fix the problem.
I've heard you say that clean language, you think of it as it's actually not a technique, but as a capacity. Can you explain more what you mean by that?
I think initially when you it's not a technique, because maybe it's a collection of techniques, of language techniques, of tools, I suppose. But underneath of those tools, there's a set of sensibilities and a way of seeing and connecting that it trains you in. And once you're trained in this, you you can really let go of the actual formal language side of it, the formal questions, all of this. And this is what I was meaning earlier when I was saying it sort of sits underneath hypnosis without trance, which is not clean by any means. It sits underneath so many of my everyday exchanges. And it's there. It's like this kind of, this energy, this set of attentional patterns, this set of awarenesses, this whole set of calibrations. So through training in clean language, it kind of calibrates you up to interactions with other human beings in a specific way. That for me, my experience is it kind of lives in me, and I'm coming from that to the point I don't even recognize it. It's now part of the water that I swim in until somebody says, how do you do that? I'm like, oh yeah, that's because of the clean language stuff.
Right.
So it's like, in a sense, you go, oh, I'm going to train in clean language. But the real trick is to let clean language train you. And then once you've let it train you, yes, of course, you can still use it overtly and explicitly, but you can let it go and become so much freer with what it's trained you in. One person said to me a few years ago, clean language, isn't that a bit boring? And I've said many times, clean language isn't really a spectator sport. It's not like entertainment, hypnotism, or anything like that.
Right.
So from the outside, there can be not too much to see. But from the inside, from the client's perspective, it is anything but boring. It is, the least boring form of Changework, probably, because you're being taken so deeply and richly into vivid experiences of your own sort of deep unconscious material. So it tends to be very absorbing.
Let's say someone's listening to this, they're super excited, but they have a client coming up, but they don't have time to learn clean language in between them. What's just something conceptually that they could go into their next session with that might make a difference? Just something they could pull from the idea of clean language, even if they don't know it yet.
Right. Maybe it's listening for sometimes what I call the key operational concepts or neuro handles. There are certain ideas, there are certain things that people will bring out that are significant, and they can be on the problem side or the resource side. If you hear these things, you go, yeah, that keeps kind of coming up. That seems like an important thing. Maybe the client keeps talking about trust, and I don't know whether I can trust them. Or you go, okay, so trust. Trust is a piece here. You can investigate that. And what kind of trust is this trust when you would, or, I don't know if I can trust so-and-so. And when you don't know if you can trust so-and-so, what kind of trust is this trust? Right? Or maybe you could be a little less clean. What kind of trust is it that you would like to have? It's just listening for these key pieces in what I call the client's organization of reality and being able to kind of hone in on them. With clean language, it might also be, I don't know if I could trust them. You could go like a moving in time question and you don't know if you could trust them. Yes, this would be a conversational approach. And if you could trust them, then what would happen? Right? Even something like that. So that's a sort of simple, that's pure clean language done conversationally, but it's a simple solution-focused mode, right? So you always have this choice. I don't know if I can trust somebody, right? Am I going to get into the problem matrix and explore that? What kind of trust? And when you don't know, how do you know that you don't know? Or if you did know, how would you know? These sorts of things. Or you can go to the problem side, and if you could trust them, how would that be different? Somebody in client shifts asked a question about, I worry about my memory, I worry about forgetting techniques and all of this before a session, and that worry gets in the way of things. It all comes out well in the end, but if you're going to recommend simplifying things and focusing on one method, what would it be? The truthful answer is probably clean language.
Right.
Because the client, so long as they speak, so long as they talk, so long as they communicate, they will give you everything you need to create change. And you can do that sticking only to the principles of clean language.
So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I hope that if you'd never heard of clean language before, that you're intrigued by it and want to find out more. And once again, James and I would like to give you this free PDF, the Clean Language Quick Start Guide, and you can find that at cleanlanguagecourse.com. Just pop in your email address and you'll get it right away. Okay, see you next time.
Changeworking is produced by Ruckus Sky. For information on training, go to clientshifts.com.